we'll kind of just have it more for us. I want to say that, today's guest is someone I'd really describe as the first, let's say, true modern Renaissance woman that I've had the pleasure to find. And nonetheless, I've also had the moment to stumble upon your work. And I truly thought back, I guess, 2 months ago when I first saw in LinkedIn the modern Renaissance, I thought this is exactly what I'm looking for, what I've been wanting to find for quite a long time. And, also the idea of the commonplace book really resonated with me. So we can also touch on that later. But I mean, nonetheless, it's also not just how you're branding it, but it's how you're living this idea of the modern Renaissance, right? So just briefly, I'll give you a little introduction. So uh, Francesca, but I'll say Cesca Centi, is a medical student, a neuroscience researcher working in spatial metabolomics, yes?
Yeah.
And you are a WWDC 25 winner. I'd love to hear more on that also. And you're the head of research at the Youth STEM Initiative at the founder of course, what is the main topic of this, the modern Renaissance. And also really interestingly, more on identity and personality. Depending on the day, you are also a writer, a musician, photographer, and a community builder, which is really, really vital for today's day and age. So I could even say that you combine a lot of the elements of there's like a lot of chaos, and now you can control it, and there can be some sort of expression that can be really fulfilling for a lot of people, right? So you're building a lot of ecosystems, and today we get to trace how these worlds are going to be connecting. So that's your. Mhm.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited because I think it's going to be quite transparent conversations compared to others.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, we have this roughly structured as like a Dante structured podcast, right? Because I've recently became fascinated in the last year more with poetry, but specifically, let's say Italian poetry. And I think this kind of fits a little bit of, let's say, our interests and bringing forth a lot of these modern Renaissance ideas, right? So
Yep.
we'll start with more on the complexity of the digital age. This is why it's called the Inferno, we're going to call it. And then the Purgatory will be more on how you connect a lot of different disciplines, which are really, really essential for what you're doing. And then Paradiso will be the future of what you see in the modern Renaissance. So my
Yeah, I
first
really like this
question,
structure.
yes, so my first question would be when someone asks you what you do, and there's a lot of nuance with this, but what answer would you like to give, and which one feels true right now for you?
To be honest, it was incredibly difficult at least a year ago. Like I would start with it's complicated, and then I would
Mhm.
ramble for like at least 10 minutes about what I do and explain everything. Now I use the people not labels model. So I simply talk about how I follow my inspiration, how I follow my curiosity, the things that I want to build, but on a very philosophical level. And I
Mhm.
never introduce myself as someone that works in a startup or like a medical student, because I think that those are simply boxes that we put ourselves in.
Yeah.
Instead, what's really important is the core and why we do the things that we do. And so overall, what I do is based on the things that I'm inspired by. Like there's nothing else above that.
Yeah, that's well said. I really resonate with that also. And I think more and more people are realizing that they don't want to be a label. I mean, more than anything, it's like you can ask someone about who they are, and they'll tend to say uh, job titles, or just something as simple as their name or where they're from, etc. And this can be very, it's the beginning of the conversation of the limitations, right? So also, I mean, in LinkedIn, it reads like you could be even like five different people or more. So I mean, if you zoom out, what is there even, or would you say something that really connects them from med school to neuroscience to now a lot more on creativity and art and now community building. Is there this sort of thread, you would say?
Well, obviously the thread is me doing all these things, but I would say that the curiosity is the real thread. And to give like a more broader of a like generic answer, the idea is that every time that you're learning a skill or you're delving into a new discipline, you find a lot of transferable skills and a lot of knowledge that you can somewhat use through patterns, through trying, experimenting in a lot of different fields. So, like the common thread would be, first of all, I come from a family of doctors, so I didn't really have a choice. But at the same time, I wanted to be an artist. And so I found the one discipline that would allow me to connect the two things, which is neuroscience, at least for me at this very moment.
Okay. And would you say that was the easy choice, or that was something that really propelled you? I mean, of course, it's important that you have this sort of influence from your family, right? That they were also doctors, but neuroscience, why specifically?
Because neuroscience has an incredible power, which is it doesn't really have a label. Like you can say broadly that you're studying this brain circuitries, but that could mean you're studying memory, you're studying how you see art, how you create, anything. And now a lot of different disciplines are becoming neuro-related. So you have neurocinema, you have neuroaesthetics, you have neuroarchitecture. So whenever you're studying neuroscience, you can delve into anything you want.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. But also, if we go into more mm, the topic on identity, and this is maybe even, it makes more sense to even before we start talking about the definition of a polymath. But where did this begin for you? And I mean, and besides the curiosity as being the thread, but moreover, more when you were a teenager, was this more in rebellion, or as we mentioned briefly, curiosity, or wanting to survive? Like this sense of wanting to do many things. Of course, neuroscience is really intriguing in and by itself, but
Well, I didn't know what neuroscience was when I was in high school, obviously. I
mhm,
found later when I was in second year of med school. But the point is that I never felt truly scattered. And since I lived in Tuscany and I lived in Florence, the idea of the Renaissance was something that was very alive for me.
yeah.
I just didn't have a word for it. Like I didn't know that the polymath existed or what it was. I just knew that Leonardo da Vinci is the polymath above
Mhm.
all the other polymaths. But since I was in middle school and high school, I always had this like relentless need to keep a lot of different projects alive. So I had for every single day I would categorize them for the passion. So for Monday I had drawing, for Tuesday I have photography and so on. And that I think that lasted for at least 4 to 5 years.
Okay.
I didn't even ask myself. Like I got obsessed with productivity. I realized that I could manage my time more efficiently, and I put all the things that I loved in my weeks at all times.
Wow. And I mean, also having it for 4 or 5 years is really awesome. I mean, for the fact that productivity serves as something that we can always strive for and be better, right? And over time, tools such as AI has really provided us to increase this, right? But I love this idea, but also want to push back because I'm on the other side of it, where maybe it's more with less discipline, but my friends will say I have discipline. But it's not like I'm gonna do this day or at this hour, etc. It's more of like a I try to use it more on there was a phrase by David Lynch that he was talking about his ideas when they come forth. There he's almost like trying to grab them metaphorically from the air, right? So like whenever I have this feeling that I want to do something besides studying, then it kind of goes into more creative work. But this has only been in the last, let's say, a year and a half. So this is why it's worthwhile. Yeah.
No, well, I think the productivity is a great tool. It just you don't have to use it in the toxic way of I have to be efficient at all times. It just making time for the things that you love. And I do have a schedule, like I do time blocking all the time. But I also give myself the possibility of being inspired by something completely random and then
Mhm.
scratch that schedule. Like I don't care.
Yeah, the sense of spontaneity at some point of the day, I think, is really vital also. for creatives, right? But I think it's just the modern age right now where it's a tool that you can't not have. You know, the sense of being structured, let's say for most of the day. But I mean, ideally, and for me, it would look more and more on having spontaneity at the core and then structure um, for the most necessary things. Let's say, you know, having meetings is a whole another thread, right? Because I think entrepreneurs can view them as time wasting, and I can understand that. But if it's like a really critical, stakeholder call, then that needs to be structured. But I don't know. I mean, where do you see just so we can kind of then go into more the inferno part, but lastly, where do you see these two elements of spontaneity and structuredness for you in the future?
I think that since my inspiration can feel like a tornado, because if I get inspired by something that is very small, then I tend to see patterns everywhere else. Like I start imagining I can make a movie out of this. I can make, I don't know, an art piece or anything else.
Yeah, yeah,
And I do need the structure. Like I need somewhere to put all of my ideas. Otherwise, I feel like I'm the mad woman in the attic, which sometimes I do feel like it. But whenever I'm in this particular type of flow, I know that I have to scratch my schedule. Otherwise, I will feel forced to do the things that I need to do them, but they're not vital in that moment. So it's
yeah,
always about priority.
yeah. Okay, I can really understand that. So this is kind of where now we're going to go straight into the inferno part. I want to specifically talk about noise and maybe feeling even fragmented. And this is also really interestingly where you also naturally inspired me to begin my Substack. So I'm writing a little bit on this right now. So how the modern age, you can just see it. I'm calling it the sea of noise, and this is just by extension algorithms. But I think this is a great place to start for our generation and also slightly younger and slightly older, let's say millennials. So, like, let's say most people don't really start in clarity or even in purpose. They definitely start in this sea of noise, as I mentioned. So, they might also maybe feel too much at times. I think I talk to my friends and we will say that we kind of feel like we're fluctuating very rapidly with the digital age. So, I want to go into this sea of noise with you. Let's say now you've said you've also felt too many interests and too much curiosity, but what did that actually look like for you very early on in medicine? So besides like, let's say now in neuroscience, what do you remember what you felt and when you were thinking right before you made that decision?
Well, I didn't really make the decision. It was an agreement that I made with my parents because when I turned 18 and I was about to choose what to do next, I remember sitting with my mother and I told her, "What if I want to become an artist?" And I don't remember if she made any particular expression, but she just answered, "Then you'll never earn enough money to live decently." And that
Yeah.
was the end of the story.
Okay.
She proceeded to tell me to be a doctoress so that I always have enough money to survive with, than have been an artist as like a personality trait or something. So I didn't make
Okay.
the decision. I just pursued what I was told. But the agreement was that I could live alone for the time being. And since I live alone, then I can structure my life however I want. Then in my second year of med school, I found out that neuroscience existed. I found out that you could study consciousness and what being human means from a neuroscience perspective. And I realized that I could put all of my passion for humans and humanitas in general into
Hmm.
neuroscience. So that felt simply natural. Then if you want to talk about like structuring the studying, that's hell. And since everything is progressing so damn fast, honestly, I feel scared because
Sure.
there are so many labs working on so many different things. And at that point, I think it probably specializing into something might be needed if you want to make like a real great work or at least advancing something. But in the moment where you're exploring, it's fine if you just let yourself be inspired by anything that you find in neuroscience because everything is so damn interesting.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, also, I completely understand that feeling of even just fear or being scared for sure. And but I'm more interested also in hearing a little bit more on You mentioned this in one of your, I believe, your neuropulsive notes, and I think this ties in right now with what we're talking about. But you said that, oh, no, sorry, Vico had warned about the barbarism of reflection and how systems become so rational and they really just detach from meaning altogether. And this was like, okay, I needed to hear this. My friends will say, Rodrigo, you are just too analytical, you're overthinking. And then I'll go in on a tangent on like Jungian archetypes because I'm like fascinated with this. But for the my question would be more on neuroscience is in of by itself so interesting as I'm hearing more about it from you, but also from past colleagues because there's so many threads you can pull and um, research on about. But how would you talk about it more on what you just mentioned? That there are, if you want to have a career out of it, you can go more into like let's say like a PhD, or you go into really research and do a dissertation on something specific. But then what about going just simply on the is it more of that, or you can go just on let's say I want to say like being a surgeon into these aspects, but it's can you elaborate a little bit more on that, let's say?
Well, you cannot really do neuroscience as a surgeon because when you're doing neurosurgery, you're treating mostly tumors and anatomical variations in the brain,
Hmm.
and also inserting specific like hardwares, for example, like deep brain stimulations that are used in Parkinson. When you're studying neuroscience, you're studying how the circuitries behaves. And so what you do is that you literally create experiments around an hypothesis and you prove if it's correct or not. And you keep on reiterating that.
Yeah.
And now that AI has entered the picture, now you also have computational models. So you try to create through coding how the brain works. And that's probably one of the biggest advancement that we've ever made because we have literally a brain in our computer if you want to make a computational model out of it. So if you want to study neuroscience, what you do is usually right now either you go into a PhD or into a
Hmm.
it's just that you have two different things because in a PhD you go very specific on one single question for at least 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
While in a startup you try to create most likely a product or a solution to a problem by using the studies that you have in neuroscience.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I can understand the attraction behind wanting to go really, really deep into specialize in a certain topic in neuroscience, and AI is just accelerating it, right? So that's like a double-edged sword, I would say. It's beautiful in that you can go far deeper into this, but then there's always that side of me that would still want to have some sort of I guess you could say that you need to commit, right?
Yeah.
But there's that element in startups where you can go and in case there's something that's more interesting, right? That process of iteration is really, really important, and I think it's becoming more important now. So we have that theory also in international management, how we're basically saying how over time we're seeing how these all these things are, let's say, activities in politics or in economics, and the it's shortening ever so slightly and more and more. So you can just look at how disruptions in supply chain are also becoming more and more important, and to capitalize or to prepare for it. So you can kind of see it in both ways in that. But I mean, you have spoken also on no, I want to ask more on privacy and data collection. This is more that I wanted to go into. So more on, let's say, synthesis, or let's say separating your personality or your interests. I have a tough time with this. So let's say, where do you stand genuinely on data privacy? Because you have mentioned before that, I mean, look at your Instagram profile or how openly you talk about all these things. How do you view, and from an artist's perspective, the wanting to genuinely express yourself, but then where do you have a sense of privacy in this?
Well, I feel that I'm a very weird content creator. I'm more of a context creator because I try to give people the emotional aspect of creating and being a very polymathic person. But I don't really talk about my own experiences, which is something that I would like to change because I think that part of the authenticity and the transparency is giving other people also an inside look on the things that you're doing and how you're doing them, how you're navigating them. I divide the privacy on if I will ever talk so openly about my own situations, then it will happen after I've dealt with them personally.
Hmm.
Because it's like art. I think that when you're creating something and you got the inspiration, you got the beautiful magic of creating something, and then you give it to someone else because it's done, and you give it to the world, then it's not yours anymore, apart from being the one that created it. Because you will see
Yeah.
yourself in the art that someone else made, but he didn't make it for you. And I think it's the same thing. Like if I told you that I'm a very polymathic person and that you can be that because there is no permission that you need to do anything that you want in life. You can be a generalist, you can be someone that specializes more, and you relate to my experience, then it's your experience. It's not mine anymore.
Yeah, exactly. That's well said. And so that's a really important point that you just mentioned because that has been my sense of wanting to express more my creativity for myself. But right now, you can just see the trend. I'll call it a trend, but that people want to, or at least I don't know if they want to, but that's just what it is now.
Yeah.
Seeing the process of you can see it in LinkedIn, you can see it in university, generally speaking, and also in podcasts or in YouTube. And but the latest example I think has always been usually on, let's say, founders like fuck up nights. It's
Oh, I
always
love that.
on the journey and what has happened. But I do find it interesting that I mean you said it perfectly. It's more on the context than on, or let's say, helping people if maybe they do resonate with this process, but it doesn't have to be so personal, right? That's really, I think that's a great way to look at it. It's like you can deal, and everyone should, with their own inner hardware or find your own soul. I think that's really relevant. You can interchange the word that we're trying to use, right? But that sense of privacy, I think, is also still very important. And I mean, I'm in Germany. It's very valuable here, and I can understand it. And but also as a this interest of artists wanting to express is still very 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 important and really interesting to me. Let's say, yeah.
Yeah, and also I think that whenever you're creating something, you don't really have the responsibility for other people reacting to it. Because I had a video going viral for no reason, and someone told me, "You're incredibly authentic, and the video really showed who you are," or stuff like that. And
Like,
I watched the video, and I was like, it didn't show anything. Like, I just talk about the fact that I made a picture and, like, I showed it somewhere in an exhibition. But they saw themselves in the video because they felt like it was authentic, they liked the conversation, and it's fine. Like, it's not mine anymore to share.
yeah, yeah. That always reminds me on there was a point I had read on how when people read philosophy, generally speaking, they will attach themselves during their point in their life
Oh,
on
yeah.
how it resonates. So there was an opening monologue. I think it was by a German, what's his name? He did the like the Tractus something on like language games. I think I forgot his name, but he was saying this in the very beginning. It's like, you know, you can enjoy this reading, you can make your own opinions and so, but I cannot tell you anything. You will make your own meaning out of it. So I'm paraphrasing. So I think that's a really that's an insight from what we see right now also in social media.
Yeah, totally. I
Yeah.
mean, I like the authenticity trend. It's just that I think it's different compared to what we have seen in the last few years because it was a lot of good editing and trying to master Premiere Pro and stuff like that. And now it's more on record on your phone and talk about the things that you've done in your day.
Hmm. Yeah, the sense of yeah, you're right. The sense of authenticity is still very important, and
Yeah.
people do want to see that. but I think you hit it home perfectly. It's that the context that you're giving, and it's if you share, it's something that I'm okay with sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So then I want to go into purgatory, and we have a great grasp now of privacy and the sea of noise and this decision making. But if we go into this realm now, I think pattern recognition would be a great way to start. So this is where we see the problems, or we see what needs to be fixed, or what I can help with, the value I can bring, my interests, so on and so forth. And especially I think this is just common in adolescence, or in let's say between the ages of 18 and 25, so on and so forth. Or maybe as a half joke, I'll say it's whenever your prefrontal cortex has developed, right? Okay, now I know what I want to do, so on and so forth. But I want to talk a little bit on your articles. The last one I read was on how you wrote, "Our purpose is to be reborn." So this is also and how Vico and the Three Ages and the Ricorso. So I'd love to hear more on your inspiration behind that, and essentially, if the question would be, is there a part of yourself that has returned into a new form, having read about the Three Ages?
To be honest, that is an inner joke that I have with my dad because I know about Biko because my dad constantly says that history is reborn. And I have been told this since I was very, very, very young. And then
Okay.
I realized that this happens also to us as well. Like you have a lot of internal narratives that gets changed throughout your lives due to experiences, things that you read, things that you integrate. And I think that if you're very polymathic, you tend to do this 10 times more. And especially if you have a lot of doors open, then you might find yourself having some projects at different ages compared to others. And in the meantime, you're also experiencing like this self sense of renovation.
Hmm.
And it's very funny because if you were telling me last year what is going to happen in 2025, obviously I would have never guessed that I had 3 jobs, that I started a community, that I'm having my third interview by the end of the year. Obviously, I would have never guessed. But the point is, the only thing that switched from my like Cesca last year is my narrative. The idea of I need permission to do this. I'm a med student and I just need to give my exams and I need to become a good doctor or whatever that is. And then I realized that no one cares if I'm going to lectures or not, as long as I give my exams. So if in March I will be in Berlin organizing an event for a startup, no one will care. I mean, everyone will say in uni that I'm mad and that why am I even doing medicine in the first place? Like a lot of people told me that. But honestly, who cares? You will also have 50% other people telling you, damn, that is crazy. I love it. I wish I were you. So no
Yeah.
one really cares. It's the same thing as before. As long as you have the context of I'm very polymathic, I love doing everything for out of curiosity, out of love, out of passion, then everything follows. Like you don't need to justify yourself in front of others.
Yeah, that's well said. I agree. And this is where I also slowly started to realize this for myself, in the sense of wanting to create your own narrative that serves you. So, like for example, this was along the lines on my Erasmus experience, and then also just being a person that likes to reflect a lot, as my friends have noted. And then I was like, yes, of course. Well, that's just what I do. That's just a part of me now, I guess. But there's obviously some downsides, but there's also great on the hobbies. Like I like philosophy, right? But I realized this critically, just as you said. If everyone from an early age realized how trivial it was to consider the output or the external from what people think of you, the world could be so much better. But it's just a part of life right now, and maybe it always has been. We don't have to go necessarily on status gains, but this is just what it is. And but I want to still go deeper into like the narrative. That if you create your own story, then you are the one that gets to rewrite it, right? Constantly. Or let's say you can go into a journey that only serves you, right? So I think that's worthwhile. Would you also say you also mentioned briefly about the Renaissance having an energy? Is there, or let's say returns as a frequency, is there a certain frequency that you are tuned into right now, but also, let's say, whenever you were coming here in the traffic?
I like the idea of a frequency because it's more of I'm tuned in something a little bit more specific for the time being, and then I can change afterwards, like tuning into a radio.
Hmm.
My radio at this moment would play something like slowing down and building foundations mostly. Because I want to create skills that can be transferred across the disciplines, and I know that requires time. And the main problem that polymathic people have is that they never reach completion in the projects that they start, which is something that I
Okay.
want to do. They also feel lonely in doing that because if they have like 10 different projects, they never see the end. They get frustrated and they keep on repeating the pattern. Instead, I want to change that into having like seasonal projects. So for the first 3 months, I will do something and I will put it like, I know for sure that I will end the project. And then I will keep repeating that. It's the first time that I try this. I don't know if it works.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, there's the counter argument would of course be like, okay, it's like when are you going to finish it, and are you the one defining when it's finished? Well, I mean, yeah, of course you can if it's a certain project, then it's either launch or it's when you're getting more customers or you're getting a certain revenue, etc. These are the regular KPIs. But if it's more on creativity, as you mentioned, I would rather it be an unfinished process, right? I
Mhm.
mean, usually artists are not going to say it's finished. I think it obviously depends on every individual and every artist, but it should still be about the process itself. So even if you're painting, if you're writing, if you're even dancing, the act in and of itself is everything. So I have always loved that frame. Like if we treated the arts and like let's say specifically dance like we do a project, then we would want the dance to be completed as fast as possible, right? So, but
Yeah.
you have to take a moment to enjoy it, so I think that's worthwhile. Yeah.
Yeah, but also you said really well about KPIs. And if you really want to say that something's finished, you can create your own KPIs also in creativity. Like, let's say
Hmm.
if I dedicate 3 months to writing, I want to have a short essay by the end of those 3 months. You don't have to, but if that makes you feel more secure, more safe, then you can do that. Like, you can stack these little pillars of, I've done this in those 3 months and that is finished.
Yeah, yeah, agree. Then I think this kind of goes in line perfectly with the another concept you mentioned, or I should say the article was on organizing a polymath life, right? And you talked about the polymath integration operating system. So if I I digress, but I don't want to strip it down to its simplest idea. But if someone were to just not have read it before, but they asked you, "Oh, what do you mean by a PIOS?" How would you describe it and how it would relate to this, let's say?
Uh, Obviously, that is just a name, like it's a label. It's simply like an integration system that you can use at any point in your life. The Polymath integration operating system is taken by another polymath. He's called Dustin, Poly Innovator, and he has talked extensively about the system. And I integrated it into the article because I thought it was relevant to make other people understand that we can also have networks that connect all the different disciplines that we want to delve into. And so
Okay.
the idea is to create a visible network of the things. So whenever I'm talking with someone that is either incredibly confused or is starting out in this polymathic journey, I usually sit down with them and then
Hmm.
we literally make a network out of the things that they're interested in. And we do that on paper because I really like doing that analogically.
Okay. Yeah.
And then we change that into their own operating system. So if there's someone that uses, I don't know, a to-do list like Trello, then we create projects around it. If it's Notion, then we create areas, we create pillars. And if it's Obsidian, then you already have the network. But the idea is to have a visible network that you can see so you know that you're not lost.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, and I actually had this exercise for one of my courses where
Nice.
we just like so I was like that's perfect. But it's so interesting to think about it from that perspective. Let's say from a circular, and then you go outward into like a hexagonal or etc. Because I mean, in just across I think K through 12, kindergarten through gymnasium, or when you graduate, everything is so linear, everything's so a to-do list. And I mean, okay, I understand that that's the way it has been, but I also started to, the last few years, started to, let's say, articulate it more on this importance on viewing. You can even have a worldview that's more, as you just put it out, it's more spherical, I want to say, as opposed to two-dimensional. So yeah, but I also want to go into the third article because we're already at 35 minutes. But really quickly, I found the article on everything you've made of is integrated. So the Renaissance learning loop, essentially, on being explore, pattern, integrate, master, create, and repeat. Is there something right now which you could say, I'm in this stage? Or as you mentioned, it kind of just depends. Or do you also view it per project for your life, etc.?
Since my life is organized using the PARA method, which is pillars, areas, resources, and archive, projects, areas, my idea is that what you just said gets applied in a more defined way for every single category. So for every project, I can tell you that I'm exploring or I'm seeing patterns or I'm integrating. Like for example, in neuroscience, I have been studying it for quite a bit. I have
Hmm.
chosen 2 to 3 topics that I want to delve into. So I'm in the process of integrating. Instead,
Okay.
for my artistic path, I think I'm in the in a place of seeing patterns and also like exploring a little bit new hobbies. But instead of thinking, okay, in which stage am I at this point? I think it in percentages, like how much of pattern or how much of mastering I want to have at this point in my life. Because, for example, I have 2 months of exams from now on. And
Yeah.
so my idea is if I'm starting something new, then it will require a lot of my mental energy. So I would rather master something that I already know. So it
Yeah.
would,
During the time, to have it correct, during the time of your exams, because
yeah,
it's more, yeah, that makes sense. Of course, if you don't want to have too much energy output on a critical time of exams. I like that. Yeah.
yeah.
So then I want to go into Paradiso because I think we are really getting somewhere from a standpoint of accumulating and really venturing out in these topics because we understand that there's all this sea of noise and we can just see it in algorithms across, right? And and wanting to integrate, I think is also really relevant for today and going into different skill sets, right? Not just what you have in your background, but if we can also go more into, let's say, the upper air, into Paradiso, and because I really, really truly see that more people are going to realize the importance of not only you and your work, but just people that think like you, right? This was really it hit home in the book that you mentioned, Range, and I didn't get to read all of it, but I paraphrased a little bit, or I skimmed a little bit of it, and a lot of these ideas, I was like, okay, this makes so much sense. I've loved the fact that it shouldn't I shouldn't attach so much emotion to it, but it's also from a logical standpoint, it makes sense if you read and it says, well, if I specialize now, I'm going to have a great career early on, but if I venture out to multiple disciplines, I'm creating this leverage that I can go into many different areas and it's more valuable. So, for example, if you've said that the modern Renaissance isn't just an era, but it can be viewed as a skill. How would you tell someone to build this skill as the modern Renaissance?
Oh, I love this question. First of all, someone that is polymathic would see a lot of possibilities and a lot of patterns and repetitions across multiple disciplines. So to develop the skill, it would mean going back to your core foundations of the things that you're doing every single day and trying to
Mhm.
understand who else is doing the same things. Like, for example, if you're structuring something and you're able to manage other people, you can do that in every project, literally. Like, you can be in a business and you can manage. You can be in a hospital and you have to manage people at the same time. Like, it's the same
Yeah.
thing. And so, from building those foundational transferable skills, then you can literally expand yourself in different fields. And you see those repetitions. And even if you see a little pattern that goes into like the liminal spaces between disciplines, then you can simply take that pattern and apply it in a new discipline and find something new.
Hmm.
So it also depends on the risk that you want to take, because you said, if I specialize early on, I'm going to have a great career. That is true if the field stays more or less the same, or if you're
Hmm.
flexible enough to change with the field, which means, do you want to take the risk to specialize into something that might eventually change? Which is why we're so scared that AI will take our jobs.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. And yeah, this was more this just the point that you said, it rings more true now, but also it's a counter or a contradiction because then, from 20 years ago, it's really, really true that if you would have specialized, you would have been with a great career. But so many careers or industries are in threat because of AI, but also it's so speculative and it's maybe more around productivity. And, we don't have to get into the amounts of money that they're spending, but it's still there. So we're all dealing with it, right? But I mean, also, whenever, we go into right now the modern renaissance that you're building, and you also think in the future, maybe an experiment that you haven't yet tried, but you're itching or you really want to try, what would that be? I know you've mentioned to me a little bit about you have a cohort of a small team and you go into you build this idea that the ideas are brought, but is there something more specific or more general that you would like to try and for the next year?
For the next year, um, yeah, that would definitely be a residency. I want to create a space for these polymathy people to really embrace their creative inner being, either
Mhm.
through personal development and like, facilitative sessions with personal coaches. And so really asking yourself, what is my inner narrative? Why is it so? What are my limiting beliefs? And what are also like the agreements that I want to have in my life to live the life that I actually want to live?
Yeah.
And at the same time, I want to bring artisans to the residency, and I want them to teach the lost art of creating using your hands or simply having a sort of simple inspiration and making a new piece of art that you would have never thought you would have made. And so the idea of a residency is literally living in community with people that are like-minded and seeing how that transforms your being and your perspective also in your life.
Yeah. Okay. I really like that. I also had or not that idea, but I had a similar idea in that I saw in YouTube a short film that I really enjoyed. It was only 20 minutes, and this is where I want to go more into. You can just ask any of my friends. Besides being an overly analytical, I will just talk about cinema nonstop.
Love that.
Yeah, so I was like, that'd be so cool if in the future you could have some sort of director or director slash writer residency program where you're going to different cities and you're working on a short film for 2 to 3 months. I haven't seen something like this, but maybe there could be on a different name. But this is where I would want to go into. And that's just one side of it. I mean, the what you're saying would be so beneficial for so many people. But I also want to now slowly land this plane, let's say, into into a monologue. No, sorry, the closing monologue. But the last question I'll leave you with is that you also have talked about rebirth, and also in my own recently made Substack, I'm also going to talk about the shadow or obsession in how in different themes that I'll write about. But how do you view this for yourself in the sense of the modern Renaissance, but also for creativity and what role they play? So it can be all three or maybe just one or two.
What do you mean by shadow?
The shadow, so let's say the unintegrated or the unconscious element of your mind. So for me it's been more on the creative side. So the creative side was unconscious for me, and I'm trying to make it conscious. Yeah.
Well, I think that all of them have a point in time where they cross-contaminate each other because rebirth always comes after either a short or a long period of, I wouldn't say pain and suffering, but of reassessing constantly a situation that you're in. And that sometimes comes with obsession. You obsess
Sure.
so much over something that you end up asking yourself, how the hell did I end up here? And the shadow is the inner monologue, the inner dialogue that you're not aware of, but that is slowly coming, that is becoming more conscious, more tangible every time, and that will eventually lead to rebirth.
Yeah. Okay, that's well said. I like that. So then people should, if they have the desire or they want to, it should be worthwhile to make the unconscious patterns or the unconscious elements conscious. I mean, this was a direct quote by Jung, right? If you just let it run run amok, I'm going to paraphrase. You'll call it fate, but you can change your life, but actively making it conscious, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Then I unfortunately we're running out of time, so I want to say, Francesca, thank you wholeheartedly. I really do love your work, and this is why I reached out to you. And people shouldn't have to choose between um, their disciplines. And it doesn't matter also the age or their layers, or even as I recently wrote, just really quickly about living with contradictions or paradoxes. You can go into and make it work for you. So the modern Renaissance isn't just a brand, but it's also a frequency, we can say. And anyone listening maybe has also felt a spark on their curiosity, and you can know that you're not scattered. You're very much multi-layered, and there's ways you can go. So, is there a last thought or phrase you I can leave you with this podcast?
Probably that you never need permission to do things that you love, and you also don't need to justify yourself in front of others. And most of the things that you're doing, you will never know the impact that you will have on other people unless you publish them.
I agree. Yeah. So publish and keep all these things away from the draft. Just send them.
Always.
Then thank you, and I will catch you guys on the next podcast.